Texas Indians were cannibals. Countless authors have said so. I even get comments on the internet all the time from people saying so. Is it true? Well, I have an account right here, the very first written account of the contact between Europeans and Texas natives, the first contact. And it was written by Cabeza de Vaca. He was in Texas around 1530. His expedition started in 1528. And at this point, they're shipwrecked on an island just off of the coast of Texas near Galveston, just west. It's called San Juan Island. It's Barrier Island. It's actually no longer there, but they call it the Isle of Misfortune because they were shipwrecked there. And at this point, the expedition has already gone awry in many ways. But cannibalism does occur. And you might be surprised at the details, though. And the tribe that they're in contact with at this point is almost surely the Karankawa, which is the larger ethno-linguistic group that inhabited the coast of Texas, there around Galveston being the center of it. It's them there. You can get this map at my website, paleoforging.com/shop. Quick plug there. But let me read to you the account, eyewitness account by Cabeza de Vaca. So at this point, their food supplies have dwindled to basically nothing. They're reliant on the Indians and foraging themselves to obtain any food. And they're trying to repair a boat, basically, to be able to do anything or get anywhere. There are settlements of the colonists in Mesoamerica at this time, so they're probably trying to get there. Cabeza de Vaca eventually does make it all the way back there, an overland journey with one other guy. They all die except for him and one companion. So I'll start there. So we set to work, but ere the boat was afloat, Tavera, a gentleman in our company, died, while the boat proved not to be seaworthy and soon sank. Now, being in the condition which I have stated, that is, most of us naked, and the weather so unfavorable for walking and for swimming across rivers and coves, and we having neither food nor any way to carry it, we decided to submit to necessity and to winter there. We also agreed that 4 men, who were the most able-bodied, should go to Panuco, which we believed to be nearby, and that, if it was God's, our Lord's will to get them there, that they should tell of our remaining on the island, and of our distress. One of them was Portuguese, called Álvaro Fernandez, a carpenter and sailor. The second was Mendez, and the third Figuero, a native of Toledo, and the fourth Estudio from Zafra. They were all good swimmers and took an Indian from the island with them. A few days after these 4 Christians had left, the weather became so cold and stormy that the Indians could no longer pull roots, and the canebrake in which they used to fish yielded nothing more. As the lodges afforded so little shelter, people began to die, and 5 Christians quartered on the coast were driven to such an extremity that they ate each other, until but one remained, who, being left alone, there was nobody to eat him. Their names are Sierra, Diego Lopez, Corral, Palacios, and Gonzalo Ruiz. The Indians were so shocked by this that there was a great uproar among them. I verily believe if they had seen this at the beginning, they would have killed them, and we all would have been in great danger. After a very short time, out of 80 men who had come there in our 2 parties, only 15 remained alive. So the Karankawa are absolutely shocked to see the Spaniards eating each other. They clearly are not familiar with cannibalism or feeding on their fellow humans as a means of subsistence. So this right there completely debunks this whole the Karankawa were cannibals myth. Now, were human flesh ever eaten by natives in Texas? Possibly. I'll get to that later at the end. But first, let's continue on this account of the Karankawa because it's very fascinating and it gives us a glimpse into a culture that is not extinct. The Karankawa are still here, still with us today, but very little was recorded about their traditional lifeways. They were basically genocided with a lot of the other natives, but here's a very interesting account about their lifeways from the perspective of the Spaniard colonists. Then the natives fell sick from stomach illness, so that half of them died as well. Obviously, disease transmitted by the Spaniards. They, believing we had killed them, with no doubt in their minds, agreed among themselves to kill those of us who survived. But when they came to execute it, an Indian with whom I was living told them not to believe that we were the cause of their dying, for if we had so much power, we would not have allowed so many of our own people to perish without being able to remedy it ourselves. He also told them there remained but very few of us, and none of us did any harm or injury, so that the best was to let us alone. It pleased our Lord that they should listen to his advice and counsel, and gave up the idea. We gave the name of the Isle of Misfortune to this island, the San Juan Island, no longer here, but off the coast near Galveston. The people on it are tall and well-formed. They have no other weapons than bows and arrows, with which they are most dexterous. The men have one nipple pierced from side to side, and sometimes both. Through this hole is thrust a reed as long as 2.5 hands and as thick as 2 fingers. Their lower lips are pierced with a piece of cane as thin as half a finger. The women do the hard work. People stay on this island from October till the end of February, feeding on the roots I've mentioned, pulled from under the water in November and December. Now, I don't know what roots these would be. Speculate it's possible for it to be bulrush or cattail. Those are popular foods among natives of North America, but those aren't really quite saltwater plants or coastal. They could be in ponds or something, freshwater ponds or pooled water sources in the middle of the island. I'm not as familiar with those barrier islands there. Nelumbo is also another possibility. Lotus, Nelumbo americana, the American water lotus. Also, Sagittaria is possible, arrowroot. There's a lot of possible roots that it could be, so we can only speculate. And they would pull those from the water in November, December. All of those that I mentioned were popularly consumed at those times, so again, it's very hard to say. They have channels made of reeds and get fish only during that time. Afterwards, they subsist on roots. At the end of February, they are moved to other areas in search of food because the roots begin to sprout and are not good anymore. Of all the people in the world, they love children most and treat them best. Should the child of one of them happen to die, the parents and relatives and the whole settlement bewail it, the lament lasting a full year, day after day. The parents begin to weep before sunrise, then the tribe begins, and they do the same at noon and at dusk. At the end of the year of mourning, they celebrate the anniversary and wash and cleanse themselves of all their paint. They mourn all their dead in this manner, except for old people, to whom they do not pay any attention, saying that they have had their time and are no longer of any use, but only take up space and food from the children. The custom is to bury the dead, except those who are medicine men among them, whom they burn. And while the fire is burning, they all dance and have a big festival. They grind the bones to powder. At the end of the year, when they celebrate the anniversary, they scarify themselves and give the pulverized bones to the relatives to drink and water. Every man has a wife he has acknowledged, but the medicine men enjoy greater privileges, since they may have 2 or 3, and among these wives there is great friendship and harmony. When one takes a woman for his wife, from the day he marries her, whatever he may hunt or fish, she has to fetch it to the home of her father without daring to touch or eat of it, and from the home of the father-in-law they bring the food to the husband, all while neither the wife's father nor her mother enters his abode, nor is he allowed to go to theirs, or to the homes of his brothers-in-law. And should they happen to meet, they go out of each other's way, a crossbow's shot or so, with bowed heads and eyes cast to the ground, holding it to be an evil thing to look at each other or speak. The women are free to communicate with their parents-in-law or relatives and speak to them. This custom prevails from that island as far as about 50 leagues inland. There's another custom that when a son or brother dies, no food is gathered by those of his household for 3 months, preferring to go hungry, but the relatives and neighbors provide them with victuals, just food. Now, since during the time we were there, so many of them died, there was great starvation in most of the lodges due to their customs and ceremonials, as well as to the weather, which was so rough that such as could go out after food brought in but very little, although working hard for it. Therefore, the Indians by whom I was kept abandoned the island and went over to the mainland in canoes to some bays where there were a great many oysters. During 3 months of the year, they eat nothing else and drink very bad water. There is lack of firewood, but a great abundance of mosquitoes. Their lodges are made of matting, probably cattail or bulrush mats. They're also semi-portable. I've read plenty of other stuff about the Karankawa. They were moving around a lot just for the seasonal abundance of things and doing a lot of bow fishing offshore. And their houses were meant to be able to taken down, put back up in places when they're moving and fit all in a canoe. So a framework of willow was typically used, already set up like, a modern commercial tent. You have the poles and all the stuff. And then to cover it, you have mats, which are probably bulrush or cattail bound in parallel, and those repel water and they're put overlapped like shingles. Their lodges are made of matting and built on oyster shells, upon which they sleep in hides when they find only by chance. There we remained to the end of April, when we went to the seashore, where we ate blackberries for a whole month, during which time they danced and celebrated incessantly. So this is almost surely Rubus trivialis, or southern dewberry, one of the most delicious wild fruits you can gather. One of my favorites, at least. Tastes sweeter and better than any blackberry you can buy in a store, but essentially are the same thing. On the island I've spoken of, they wanted to make medicine men of us without any examination or asking for our diplomas, because they cure diseases by breathing on the sick, and with that breath and their hands they drive ailments away. So they summoned us to do the same in order to be at least of some use. We laughed, taking it as a joke, and said that we did not understand how to cure people. Thereupon, they withheld our food to force us to do what they wanted. Seeing our obstinacy, an Indian told me that I did not know what I was talking about when I claimed that what he knew was useless, because stones and things growing out in the field have their virtues, and he, with a heated stone, by placing it on the stomach, could cure things and take away pain, so that we, who were wiser men, surely had greater power and virtue. In the end, we found ourselves in such difficulty that we had to do it in order to avoid punishment. This manner of curing someone is as follows. When someone is ill, they call a medicine man, and after that person is well again, not only do they give the medicine man all their belongings, but they even make an effort to obtain things from their relatives for him. All the medicine men do is make a few cuts where the pain is located, and then they suck the skin around the incisions. They cauterize with fire, thinking it very effective, and I found it to be so in my experience. Then they breathe on the spot where the pain is, and believe that with this, the disease goes away. The way we treated the sick was to make the sign of the cross over them while breathing on them, recite our Pater Noster and Ave Maria, just standard Catholic stuff, and pray to God our Lord as best as we could give them good health and inspire them to do us favors. Thanks to his will and the mercy he had upon us, all those for whom we prayed, as soon as we made the sign of the cross over them, told the others that they were cured and felt well again. Placebo effect, obviously. For this, they gave us good cheer and would rather be without food themselves, so that they could give it to us, and they gave us hides and other small things. So great was the lack of food that then I often spent 3 days without eating anything whatsoever, and they were in the same plight, so that it seemed to me impossible for life to last, although I afterwards suffered still greater privations and much more distress, as I shall relate further on. So actually from this point on, further in the account, he's basically considered a medicine man by the Indians, and he's kind of forced to inhabit this role where he prays over people and all this stuff. And this stuff kind of gets a bad rap. I think a lot of traditional shamanism does rely heavily on the placebo effect, and the placebo effect is not a joke. It's a very real thing, and modern scientific studies have even shown that even when people know it's a placebo effect, it still works, and in many cases it's super effective, better than pretty much any other treatment. So it's nothing to scoff at. The Indians who were holding Alonso de Castillo, Andres Durantes, and the others who were still alive were of another language and stock. They had gone to feed on oysters at another point of the mainland, where they remained until the first day of the month of April. Then they came back to the island, which is nearly 2 leagues away, where the channel is broadest. The island is half a league wide and 5 long. All the people of this country go naked. Only the women cover part of their bodies with a kind of wood that grows on trees. So this is an interesting statement. I know that the inner bark of some trees can be very soft and pounded up to form a cloth, top of cloth in the South Pacific, made from Brusonetia papyrifera, which is in the mulberry family, that was commonly used as a kind of fabric and actually very soft. I mean, the description as a kind of wood is not adequate to describe that it's going to be very soft and pleasant to the touch. And what they were using, it's kind of hard to say. It could be the inner bark and other species. Some elm trees have pretty good inner bark to use for this. There are mulberries that grow in the area. Morus rubra could have been used. That has pretty soft, nice inner bark, but it's just up to speculation. Most likely it was some pounded inner bark forming a kind of fabric. The girls go about in deerskins. They are very liberal towards each other with what they have. They have no ruler. All who are in the same family lineage cluster together. There are 2 distinct languages spoken on the island, those of one language called Kapokes, those of another Han. No, I have both of those in my map here. Actually, I'm not sure I have Han. That's probably referring to a different language, but I have Coapites, which is probably what is being referred to here. Actually, there might be Kapokes as well. Oh yeah, no, here we go. Kapokes and Han. So that's pretty close to Houston, where we're talking about, and Galveston and all that, and pretty near to the Atákapa. The Karankawa greater ethno-linguistic group likely included most of the coast here down to the South Bend, which is going to be Cohutecan and Carrizo-Coma Crudis. They have the custom, when they know each other and meet from time to time, before they speak, to weep for half an hour. After they have wept, the one who receives the visitor rises and gives everything he possesses to the other. The other takes it, and in a little while goes away with everything. Sometimes, after having given and obtained everything, they even separate without having uttered a word. There are other very queer customs, but having told the principal ones and the most striking ones, I must now proceed to relate what else has happened to us. So the custom of giving is actually a very interesting one, and also features prominently in many indigenous peoples of North America. Not quite exactly as described here, but the custom of lavish giving. That was basically one of the greatest signs of status, how much you can give away. And the potlatches of Athabascan peoples and also the Haudenosaunee is known among them, where there are basically regular meetings and chiefs strive to give away as much as they can, also known among Pacific Northwest natives. So a common thing, it might sound strange to the Western ear, so obsessed with consumerism and material wealth that you would want to give it away, but what they're missing, and people who might judge that in a negative manner or be confused by it, is that to give away is the sign of high status. If you can afford to give away everything, then you are extremely high status individual, so people would compete to give it away. And it's also functionally, just biologically, a great way of group selection, essentially. Not that we're going to get into the group selection with humans argument right now, which has been hotly contested by biologists for 100 years. But personally, I believe in group selection for humans and other animals. Some people don't even believe group selection occurs at all. Nevertheless, group selection, we won't go to the details, but if everyone agrees to give as much as they can to other people, then you overall are much more likely to have a stable resource base for everyone, and everyone's going to be doing better off, because this is kind of an unpredictable environment. These are true hunter-gatherers. They're not horticulturists at all, and they're not doing much storage. I mean, they likely have some stores set away for winter and all that stuff, but when the environment is unpredictable like that, a lot of it just comes down to luck whether someone has enough for themselves or not. But if everyone works together and people who have give to those who do not, then that mitigates that effect, and the resources spread out in the environment in an unpredictable manner become a more homogeneous. So it's a very wise tactic for this culture to be implementing. After Dorantes and Castillo had come back to the island, they gathered together all the Christians, who were somewhat scattered, and there were 14 in all. I, as I have said, was in another place on the mainland, whither my Indians had taken me, and where I suffered from such a severe illness that, although I might otherwise have entertained some hope for life, this was enough to take it away from me completely. When the Christians learned of it, they gave an Indian the marten robe we had taken from the cacique and the chief, as I had stated before, in order for him to guide them to where I was to see me. 12 of them came, 2 having become so weak that they did not dare take them along. The names of those who came are blah blah blah, like 8, 9, 10 people. As they reached the mainland, they found still another of our men called Francisco de Leon, and the 13 went along the coast, so it was 13 total. After they had gone past, the Indians with whom I was living told me of it, how Hieronymo de Alanis and Lope de Oviedo had been left on the island. My sickness prevented me from following or seeing them. I had to remain with the same island Indians for more than a year because they made me work so much and treated me badly. I decided to flee and go to those who lived in the woods on the mainland, the people of Churubusco. I could no longer stand the life I was forced to lead. Among many troubles, I had to pull the edible roots out of the water and from among the cane where they were buried in the ground. My fingers became so tender from this that the mere touch of straw caused them to bleed. The reeds would cut me in many places because many of them were broken. I had to go in among them with the clothing I had on, of which I had recounted. This is why I made an effort to join the other Indians. Among these, I improved my condition a little by becoming a trader, doing the best in it I could, and they gave me food and treated me well. They entreated me to go about from one place to another and get the things that they needed, since on account of constant warfare, there's neither travel nor barter on the land. So trading my wares, I penetrated inland as far as I cared to go, along the coast as much as 40 or 50 leagues. My stock consisted mainly of pieces of seashells and cockles, and shells with which they cut a fruit that is like a bean, used by them for healing and in their dances and feasts. So this is of greatest value among them, besides shell beads and other objects. So to me, this sounds like the Texas mountain laurel. These they're beans. They're usually a bright red, but I have some special variants here which I've collected. But these were highly valued by natives in Texas historically and to this day. They are a trade item. They're valued ceremonially and may have other uses that I won't get into here. These things I carried inland and in exchange brought back hides and red ochre with which they rub and dye their faces and hair, flint for arrow points, glue, and hard canes wherewith to make them, and tassels made of the hair of deer which they dyed red. This trade suited me well because it gave me liberty to go wherever I pleased. I was not bound to do anything, and I was no longer a slave. Wherever I went, they treated me well, and they gave me things to eat in exchange for my wares. My principal object in doing it, however, was to find out in what manner I might get farther away. I became well known among them. They rejoiced greatly when they saw me, and I would bring them what they needed, and because of my fame, those who did not know me wanted to do so and would try to meet me. I would take a long time to tell my sufferings while trading thus. Danger, hunger, storms, and frost often came upon me in the open fields when I was alone, and I escaped to the mercy of God our Lord. For this reason I did not go out trading in winter, it being the time when the Indians themselves remained in their huts and houses, unable to go out and assist each other. In this way I spent nearly 6 years in that part of the country, alone among them and naked, as they all were themselves. So I'm just going to end it there. But as I said, I will go back to the mention of cannibalism, what I started out with here, and whether it actually occurred among the Indians of Texas. So as we saw, they were absolutely scandalized by the Spaniards eating each other. So they were not okay with cannibalism by any means. The Akokisa are also, or Cabeza and Atákapa. Cabeza are part of the Atákapa greater ethno-linguistic group, have historically been called cannibals and accused of such, and as have many other natives of Texas. But the only references I found to this at all, which might not even be true, are corresponding pretty closely to other cannibalistic practices of indigenous people globally, actually, which is in a ceremonial way. So there can be many different manifestations of this. And one, I believe it's indigenous peoples of Papua New Guinea, it's known, wherein you're eating your ancestors, essentially. And I think there was actually mention, and I just was reading about the bones being preserved of the dead and being crushed and consumed, or being used ritualistically in some way. So the incorporation of the body of one's ancestor, not in whole, but just in a small representative part, was known among indigenous peoples globally, and specifically of natives of Texas here and there, though there's only minor references to that. The other possible manifestation of what we might call cannibalism would be the sort of ceremonial disrespect of one's enemy. Now, I would consider true cannibalism to be eating for sustenance. You want food, you need nutrition, and you're killing and eating other humans for this express purpose, though there might be others, but one of the purposes is to simply gain nutrition from the body of another human. There is no evidence for that ever being practiced by Texas Indians. Just not at all. But there are cases in which it has been recorded where Texas natives were killed enemies and ritualistically consumed small part of their body. Now, what was the purpose of this? We can only really speculate, but we can make some pretty good guess. It's most likely as an insult to that enemy to say, you are merely prey to me. So Indians of Texas absolutely cannot be considered cannibals in basically any sense of the word, unless you're really going to stretch for that ceremonial implementation of it. They were completely shocked by what the Spaniards did and almost killed them all just for seeing it once. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed that. This is one of the most interesting accounts of Spanish expeditions, and again, the very first contact between Europeans and Texas indigenous peoples, the account of Cabeza de Vaca, narrative of the Narváez expedition. And there's many different formats of this, but it should be pretty easy to find. It's in the public domain. Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca was the author. And by the way, I use this reference extensively in my research of the historical ethnobotany of indigenous peoples of Texas, or rather all of the ethnobotany of this plant species that occur in Texas for my research manuscript I've been working on for 13 years now. And I recently published a book based on that research, Native Food Plants of Texas. And if you want to support my work or you value this or are interested in how plants were being used specifically for food in Texas by natives, please buy my book. Support my work. It'll help me out a lot. I appreciate it, y'all. All right, y'all, take it easy.